They tell you the bearskin hat weighs 1.5 pounds. They don't tell you it feels like 3 when a 4-year-old is staring up at you from 18 inches away, bottom lip trembling, fists clenched, working herself up to the most catastrophic cry you've seen since the 2019 state banquet when the French ambassador spilled claret on the Duchess of Cornwall's shoes. They tell you the rules. Do not move, do not speak, do not acknowledge. You are ceremonial, you are architecture, you are the wall between order and chaos. They don't account for children. Nobody accounts for children. In 22 years of palace service, 2 monarchs, 4 prime ministers, 1 memorable incident involving a corgi and a visiting head of state's trouser leg that we do not discuss. I have watched my fellow guards hold the line against protesters, press intrusions, a man dressed as a giant chicken who somehow bypassed 3 security cordons, and a November wind that came off the Thames like God himself was bored and wanted to see what we were made of. Nothing breaks a guardsman like a child who has decided, in their full sovereign confidence, that your bearskin hat looks like it belongs on a teddy bear and they would like it back. These are those stories, not the ones in the official record. Not the ones the press photographs. The ones that happen in the 3 seconds between protocol and humanity, that narrow, dangerous, occasionally hilarious gap where a guardsman is no longer a symbol and becomes, against every instinct in his trained and pressurized body, a person. I logged all of them. I shouldn't have. The logbook was for security incidents, shift changes, weather anomalies that affected ceremonial posture, but I logged them anyway, in the margins, in pencil, in the particular shorthand of a man who has spent 2 decades watching something impossible happen on a regular schedule. Children walk up to the immovable, and the immovable, quietly, briefly, in ways the cameras sometimes catch and sometimes don't move. What follows is not a fairy tale about the crown. It is not a PR exercise about the warmth of the institution. It is 3 accounts, as accurate as my marginal notes and failing memory allow, of the moments I watched men trained to be monuments remember, for 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 1 long terrible afternoon, that they were something else first. Read them however you like, but I'll tell you this, the boy in part 2, the one with the gap-toothed grin and the toy sword, he's 17 now. He still writes to the regiment every Christmas. The first thing you learn on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace is how to see without looking. Your eyes fix on the middle distance, not the crowd, not the tourists, not the father of 4 from Wolverhampton who is currently positioning his entire family for a photograph in which he will inevitably be slightly out of frame. You see it all in your peripheral vision, a soft wash of color and movement that your brain has been conditioned to sort in milliseconds. Threat, non-threat, nuisance, press, dignitary, child. Child was always its own category. I was stationed at the corner logbook post that morning, which meant I had the sightlines without the exposure, close enough to document, far enough to breathe. The September crowd was the usual composition, tourists in trainers, a school group from somewhere in the East Midlands, whose teacher had the look of a woman who had made a fundamental miscalculation about the day's itinerary. 2 Japanese couples photographing each other in rotation, and a family of 5 from what I later determined from the father's accent. When things escalated to the point where he felt compelled to speak was the outskirts of Edinburgh. The family had 3 children, 2 boys old enough to be bored and performing it loudly, and a girl. She was perhaps 5, perhaps 6, small in the way of children who haven't yet been informed that the world will not simply arrange itself around their requirements. She wore a red coat. The color was significant later, though I didn't know it then, and she held, tucked under one arm with the fierce possessiveness of the recently bereaved, a stuffed rabbit that had clearly been through considerable adversity. The rabbit was missing one eye. I noted this because I note everything. It is the quirk that kept me employed and occasionally drove my wife, Margaret, to the particular silence that precedes a frank conversation about my priorities. The guardsman she was staring at was Corporal James Whitfield, 26 years old, 3 years in the regiment. A man from Shropshire who, in the 15 months I had observed him, had demonstrated approximately 2 expressions, neutral and the specific tightening around the jaw that meant he was working very hard to maintain neutral. He was good. He was, by all measurable criteria, exactly what you wanted, standing in a sentry box on a Tuesday morning in September. He had not, to my knowledge, previously been in direct confrontation with a 5-year-old in a red coat. The girl approached the way children approach things that interest them directly, without any of the social negotiation that adults lay around their curiosity. She walked up to Whitfield and stood in front of him and looked up at the bearskin hat for a long time. Her brothers were shouting something about ice cream. Her father was attempting to reposition everyone for the photograph. She didn't move. Whitfield stared through her, at the middle distance, at the architecture of the morning. She tilted her head. He did not tilt his. She reached into the pocket of the red coat and produced, with the gravity of a diplomat presenting credentials, one half of a chocolate digestive biscuit. She held it up to him. There are things that aren't in the training manual. Not because the regiment hasn't thought of them. We have thought of everything. Genuinely, there are protocols for scenarios that would make a Hollywood screenwriter feel inadequate. But because some things are not threats in any category, the manual recognizes. A child offering a biscuit is not a security incident. It is not a dignitary engagement. It is not a press situation. It is technically nothing. It felt like everything. Whitfield's eyes did not move. His jaw did not move. His hands did not move. He was, by every external measurement, the statue the tourists had come to photograph. Except I saw it. I logged it at 10:47 because I log everything in pencil in the margin, W left hand, 3-second interval. His left hand held at his side in the proper position, closed and opened. One deliberate movement. A fist made and released, so small and so controlled that if you weren't watching for the specific tell, if you hadn't spent 15 months learning the vocabulary of a man who expressed everything in the tightening and releasing of muscle, you would have missed it entirely. He'd seen the biscuit. He'd felt the weight of it, the offering. And he'd made a choice in 3 seconds in the gap between what he was trained to be and what the small girl in the red coat was requiring him to be. He had held the line. He had held it through the biscuit and through the rabbit with one eye and through the September light hitting her upturned face at the angle that made everything feel. For reasons I was not prepared to examine, important, she waited another 30 seconds. The father called her name, Rosie. Come on, Rosie, leave the man alone. And she looked back at him with the expression of a child who has been asked to abandon something unfinished. She looked back at Whitfield. She placed the half biscuit on the ground in front of his boots. Carefully, deliberately, the way you leave an offering at something you consider sacred. Then she went back to her family. I watched Whitfield for the next 4 minutes. He did not look down. He did not acknowledge the biscuit. He continued to stare at the middle distance, at the architecture, at the nothing that is the whole performance of what he is. But his left hand opened and closed one more time, just once. At 11:20, during the shift changeover, I watched the incoming guard, Private Davies, 19, 3 months in, still learning where to put his eyes, nearly step on the biscuit and stop. He looked down at it. He looked up at Whitfield. Whitfield said nothing, because Whitfield never says anything on the forecourt, and because there was nothing in the manual about this either. Davies stepped around it. I don't know why I find that significant. I've been trying to work it out since September. Margaret says I should let it go. She's probably right. I haven't let it go. The biscuit was gone when I checked at 1400, whether a pigeon took it or the cleaning crew, or something else. I didn't see, but I know Whitfield was on the forecourt until 13:30. I logged it, in pencil. In the margin, left hand, one movement, 13:28. I should tell you about the sword first. It was plastic. Bright yellow with a star on the hilt and a crack running up the flat of the blade where it had clearly lost an argument with something harder than itself. A doorframe, maybe, or the particular enthusiasm of a boy who does not yet understand that enthusiasm has consequences. It was the kind of toy that costs £4 at a service station and within 48 hours has become the most important object in the known universe. The boy's name was Daniel, 7 years old. I know this because he told Sergeant Marcus Webb at the top of his voice, along with his age, his school year, and the information that he had been specifically promised he would get to see a real guard. And here was a real guard, and he, Daniel, had brought his sword, and he would, like his mother, was already closing her eyes at this point, a duel. Marcus Webb was 34, 14 years in the regiment, a man from Bristol who had served in 2 overseas tours before coming home to ceremonial duties, a transition he described to me once over a terrible cup of tea in the staff room as going from being genuinely shot at to being photographed by Germans. He had the compact, unhurried quality of someone who has been frightened enough, and seriously enough, that minor alarms no longer register as alarms. He had a scar along his left forearm from something he didn't discuss and a specific talent for becoming very still in a way that was nothing like a statue. It was the stillness of a man who is paying close attention and has learned to make that invisible. He was paying close attention to Daniel. The crowd that day was lighter than usual, a Thursday in February, cold enough to discourage the amateur tourists and thin the crowd to the genuinely committed, which meant there was, unusually, a clear sightline from my post to the sentry position, and I watched the whole thing with the particular alertness of a man who has learned that the interesting incidents never announce themselves. Daniel was standing in front of Webb, with the yellow sword held in both hands at the port arms position. He had apparently invented for himself a diagonal across the chest, chin up, the stance of a boy who has watched a great deal of television and absorbed it differently from how the producers intended. His mother stood 6 feet back, a woman in her early 30s with the expression of someone calculating how many more years until school age ends, and this particular phase of her life concludes. He issued the challenge again. A duel, please. He had his sword. Webb stared through him. This is the correct response. This is always the correct response. You are architecture. You are ceremonial. You are the wall. And then Daniel did something I had not anticipated. He knelt down, full kneel, one knee on the cold forecourt stone, sword held point down in front of him in a formal position that I checked the photograph later, because I have a professional disease, was actually closer to correct medieval tournament posture than anything you'd see in a film. His mother's hand went to her mouth. I leaned forward on my logbook. "Please," said Daniel, with the weight of someone who has been told that please is the word that opens locked doors, and who is deploying it now like a last resort. What happened next took 4 seconds. I have replayed those 4 seconds from the logbook entry so many times. Webb, 14 to 23, 4 seconds. Decision point. That I'm no longer certain which details are memory and which are the story I've told myself about the memory. But I logged what I saw, and what I saw was this. Webb's eyes moved. Not far, not dramatically, a fraction of a degree down and to the left, to the kneeling boy with the plastic sword. A movement so controlled it was almost not a movement at all, just a slight adjustment, a human aperture opening for the span of a single breath. Then his right boot moved forward, 1/2 step. His right hand, held at his side, turned outward at the wrist, a rotation of perhaps 30 degrees that, if you were a 7-year-old who had absorbed a great deal of TV, might look very much like the preliminary movement of a man who is about to accept a challenge. Daniel made a sound I'm not able to transcribe. It was somewhere between a gasp and a declaration of victory. Webb's face did not change. His boot returned to position. His wrist returned to position. He resumed staring at the middle distance. The whole thing lasted 4 seconds, and in the official record it is nothing, because the official record does not have a category for it. But Daniel stood up. He stood up slowly, with the careful dignity of someone who has received a communication in a private language and wants to acknowledge it correctly. He held the yellow sword at his side. He stood straight. He stood, I realized, at something approximating attention. For 30 seconds, a 7-year-old in a blue anorak stood at attention in front of a guardsman on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, and the guardsman stared at the middle distance, and neither of them moved, and the mother had stopped calculating anything and was just watching. Then Daniel's mother said his name, and he broke position and ran to her, and she pulled him into a hug that bent her double, and I looked away, because some things are not mine to log. I did log one thing at the bottom of the entry, in smaller writing than usual. DH7, yellow sword, kneel stand sequence. Webb, wrist rotation, 30 degrees, deniable. Deliberate, deliberate. I'd been in the regiment long enough to know the difference between a man shifting his weight because his knee aches and a man making a choice. I'd been in long enough to know that the choice Webb made in 4 seconds cost him something, not his career, Not his record, nothing that could be measured or disciplined. Something smaller. The specific effort of letting something matter, briefly, in a role that requires you to let nothing matter. The sword Daniel left, he didn't leave it. He carried it out with both hands still. The way you carry something you've decided is more important than it was when the day started. Webb didn't watch him go, I did. He wrote to the regiment first when he was 8, a letter in the large, careful print of a child who has been told to write neatly and is trying. He wrote again at 9, at 10, the letters got longer as the handwriting got smaller and the world he was describing got larger. He wrote about school, about moving, about his father's new job up north. He always asked, at the end, if the guard with the serious face was still there. I never replied to the letters. That's not my department, and anyway, I didn't know what I would say. But I read every one, because it is the nature of my particular occupational disorder that I read everything, and I kept them in the back of the logbook, and at some point they stopped being filed evidence and became something else. I'm still working out what. This one is different. The others happened on the forecourt, in the open, in the wash of tourist cameras and September light. Deniable. Peripheral? The kind of thing that lives in pencil in the margin, because it cannot survive in ink. This happened inside. I will not give you the date or the specific corridor because I am still employed and moderately fond of my pension. And because some details are the kind that transform a private account into a formal incident and a formal incident into the sort of thing that ends careers, including mine, in quiet administrative ways that are somehow worse than the loud ones, I will tell you what I saw. I will tell you what it meant, as best I can determine, and I will trust you, as I always apparently trust people who are not my direct superiors, to understand that the meaning and the incident are two different things, and that the incident was minor. The meaning was not minor. Her Royal Highness was 4 years old at the time of this account. I will not name her. You know who she is. She had, at 4, the particular quality of small royals who have been raised in proximity to ceremony and formality, not stiffness, exactly. More a kind of attentiveness, an awareness that rooms have different temperatures and people behave differently inside them. She watched things, she noticed things. She had the large, serious eyes of a child who is collecting data she doesn't yet know what to do with. The guard was Sergeant First Class Eleanor Hargreaves. I want to say that clearly, because I have spent this entire account writing about men and their left hands and their boot rotations and their invisible wrist movements, and this story belongs to a woman, and the thing Hargreaves did was categorically different from what Whitfield and Webb did, and I think the difference matters. Hargreaves was 41 20 years in. The kind of record that reads on paper as a clean and ascending line, commendations, promotions, the gradual accumulation of trust that the institution awards slowly and withdraws rapidly if you give it reason. Off paper, she was the woman the younger female officers went to when something happened that they couldn't put in a report, and she listened and advised, and then filed the report correctly without losing the thing underneath it. She had that skill. I have always believed it was the rarer and more important one. She was stationed at the internal corridor post that afternoon, which is not a ceremonial post. No tourists, no cameras, no performance required. It's a functional position, presence and observation. The work is different there. It asks for awareness rather than endurance, and the best people in those posts have a quality I can only describe as alert stillness, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Hargreaves had it. The princess was with her governess in transit between engagements, that particular palace word for the continuous scheduling of a child's day into segments that have names and end times and transition protocols. The governess was distracted. A phone call, I think, or a message. She stepped slightly to the side, the way adults step to the side when the technology in their hand is suddenly more urgent than the small person walking next to them, and for approximately 90 seconds, the princess was effectively alone in the corridor. She didn't bolt. Didn't take advantage of the gap the way I've seen other small royals do. The sprint toward unscheduled freedom, the detour, the hide-and-seek gambit that sends staff into controlled panic. She walked at her normal pace until she was standing in front of Hargreaves. She looked up at her the way Daniel had looked up at Webb, but without the sword and without the television-absorbed ceremonial posturing. She just looked the direct, uncomplicated appraisal of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned to disguise her looking. Hargreaves looked back, not through her, at her. The distinction is total. The princess said something. I was at the far end of the corridor and I caught only the shape of the words, not the words themselves, but I watched Hargreaves' face change in the way faces change when they've heard something unexpected and not unpleasant, the very small lift around the eyes, the almost nothing that passes for surprise in a woman who has been trained to suppress it. She crouched down, full crouch, both knees, eye level with a 4-year-old in uniform in an internal palace corridor on a Wednesday afternoon. I stopped writing. I don't know what they said. That's the honest accounting. I was too far away, and I had the professional instinct not to close the distance, because closing the distance would have changed what was happening, and what was happening felt like it needed to happen without me in it. I saw the shape of a conversation, the princess speaking, Hargreaves responding, both of them at eye level, both of them apparently taking the exchange seriously. It lasted 3 minutes. The governess finished her call and looked up and found the princess, and there was a brief navigational rearrangement. The governess's face cycling through relief and professional concern and the specific calculation of whether what she was seeing constituted an incident that needed to be noted, and the calculation landing, visibly, on no. She waited the remaining 30 seconds until the conversation reached its own natural conclusion, which it did without her intervention. The princess said something final. Hargreaves nodded once, a single deliberate movement. The princess walked back to her governess, and they continued down the corridor, and the engagement continued on schedule. Hargreaves stood up. She straightened her uniform. She returned to position. I wrote one line in the log. Hargreaves. Internal post, 1517 protocol deviation, non-ceremonial position, undocumented. Duration, 3 minutes. I didn't write what I thought the deviation was. I didn't write what I thought it meant. Or what question a 4-year-old might have asked a female guard in a palace corridor that would cause a 20-year veteran to crouch down and answer it at eye level, as though the answer mattered. I almost asked her. We have worked in proximity for 6 years. I have a reasonable account of who she is, and I believe she would have told me in the elliptical, deniable way of people who understand what can and cannot go in a report. I didn't ask. I'm not entirely sure why. I've told myself it was professional instinct. Some conversations are not mine to open. I've told myself I didn't want the answer to become something I had to log. I've told myself a lot of things, in the months since, in the margin space of the logbook, where I write the things I can't put in ink. What I keep coming back to is this. The princess walked away from that conversation looking like a child who has had something confirmed that she suspected but hadn't yet been certain of. I've watched a great many people leave a great many rooms in 22 years. I know the walk of someone who has been given something, and the walk of someone who has had something taken. She had been given something. I don't know what Hargreaves said. I know it was true. These accounts were compiled from personal observation logs, 2019 to 2023. All names and identifying details have been altered in accordance with the Official Secrets Act and common human sense. The logbook is still active. The margins are running out of space.